They called him a dreamer. They mocked his plan, but when the dust settled, the same people couldn't stop praising his name. This is the untold story of Ibrahim Traoré, the man who built hope when all hope was gone. Stick around till last, because what he built wasn't just a project, it was a revolution. But before the world knew his name, Africa was bleeding in silence. Foreign powers called it development. But the roads they built led only to their minds. The deals they signed filled their banks and not ours. Africa had gold, oil, and diamonds. But the people? They had hunger. And then came a soldier, young, fierce, and fearless. He looked around and said, "If we don't build our own tomorrow, someone else will own it." That's where his story begins. And what he built next, no one in Africa had ever dared before. Africa. A land bursting with sunlight, strength, and endless riches. Yet somehow its people carry the heaviest chains. For generations, outsiders came dressed as friends, shaking hands, smiling for cameras, and leaving with gold, oil, and power. Every handshake stole a little more. Every promise built another wall around freedom. The streets tell the story. Children studying under broken lights. Farmers working land they don't even own. Young men leaving home with no plan but survival. The soil is rich, but the hands that work it are poor. They said, Africa is developing. But developing for who? The companies that dig into the ground and fly away with diamonds? The banks that lend money just to take it back with interest? It's like a game where Africa never gets to hold the ball. And in the middle of it all, one soldier kept watching in silence. Ibrahim Traoré, young, grounded, not the kind of man who spoke to impress, but the kind who listened before he acted. He walked through dusty markets, hearing the cries of traders who could barely feed their families. He saw the endless queues outside hospitals, the abandoned schools, the hopeless eyes of people who had stopped believing in change. One evening he stood on a hill overlooking Ouagadougou. The sun was setting, coloring the sky blood red. He turned to his aide and said quietly, "They've stolen our gold, our land, and now they want to steal our future. But not anymore." That was the moment everything changed. The spark in his voice wasn't anger, it was vision. He wasn't thinking of power or revenge. He was thinking of rebuilding a nation from the ground up. But how do you rebuild when the system itself is designed to keep you weak? How do you rise when even your allies doubt you? Ibrahim didn't have the answers yet, but he had something better: belief. And belief in a place that's forgotten what hope feels like can be more dangerous than any weapon. Because when a man truly believes in change, the world around him starts to shake. For weeks, Ibrahim disappeared from the public eye. The rumors spread fast. Some said he was negotiating weapons, others whispered he'd given up. But behind the walls of a dimly lit military compound, something far greater was happening. Ibrahim had gathered a small circle: engineers, scientists, farmers, and teachers, people no one ever paid attention to. "We don't need their money," he told them. "We need our own system, one they can't touch." The plan sounded impossible at first, a secret project to create a network of self-sustaining energy hubs across Burkina Faso. Each hub would power villages, schools, and farms, free from foreign aid or corporate control. It wasn't about building machines. It was about building independence. Funds were tight. Every franc mattered. Ibrahim sold personal items, cut military luxuries, even redirected his own salary into the project. His men called him crazy. "You can't fight the world alone," one officer said. Ibrahim just smiled. "I'm not fighting the world. I'm teaching it a lesson." Blueprints covered the tables. Nights turned into mornings. The compound became a heartbeat of silent revolution, a place where hope was engineered, not prayed for. But what Ibrahim didn't know was that not everyone in his circle shared his vision. Someone, somewhere inside that very room, was already sending messages to the other side. Weeks turned into months, and Ibrahim's dream began to choke under the weight of reality. The plan needed more steel, more circuits, more people, and most of all, more money. Burkina Faso's economy was already bleeding, and every coin spent on the project was a risk that could spark outrage. Public murmurs grew louder. "Why waste money on fantasies when people can't eat?" they said. Markets buzzed with rumors that Ibrahim had lost his mind. Even his ministers began to doubt him. One late night, a close aide confronted him. "Sir, the treasury can't take it anymore." "You'll drown us." Ibrahim stared at the flickering light above him. "Then let me drown building something worth saving," he replied quietly. Desperate, he began reaching out to local traders, gold miners, and even street vendors. He promised them a future, not of charity but of power and pride. Slowly, people started handing what little they had. Coins, jewelry, savings, all poured into the cause. It wasn't just money now. It was trust. But deep in the crowd stood one man with cold eyes and a fake smile, taking notes. The hidden enemy, pretending to be a supporter, waiting for the right moment to strike. As construction began, the tension in the air thickened. The noise of hammers and drills couldn't silence the growing doubt spreading through the city. Opposition leaders mocked him on every platform, calling the project Traore's fantasy island. Even loyal workers started whispering, "What if he's wrong this time?" But Ibrahim never flinched. Every night he climbed to the top of the half-built tower, his so-called visionary hub, and looked over the silent city. In his eyes, the steel beams and unfinished walls weren't just structures. They were the bones of Africa's future. One evening, when a reporter asked him if he feared failure, he smiled faintly and said, "Failure? No, I fear dying before trying." His words spread like wildfire across social media. Slowly, whispers of doubt turned into sparks of belief. The people began to sense it, something bigger was coming. And for the first time, even his enemies started to feel uneasy, realizing Ibrahim Traoré wasn't chasing dreams. He was building destiny. Then came the night that would test everything. Just when the project's skeleton started to rise proudly against the orange horizon, flames burst out of one of the main construction sites. The air turned thick with smoke, screams echoed, and chaos spread like wildfire. Workers ran, crying out that it was sabotage. Ibrahim arrived within minutes, his face hard as stone. The fire reflected in his eyes like a challenge from fate itself. "Who did this?" he growled as the crowd gathered around, terrified and angry. Rumors flew that it was an accident, but Ibrahim knew better. Somewhere in the shadows, his hidden enemy was smiling. The media exploded. Project of Hope burned. Millions lost overnight. The opposition celebrated, declaring it the final nail in his dream. His own ministers urged him to stop, to give up before it destroyed him completely. But instead, Ibrahim stood before the nation and said, "If a fire can kill a dream, it was never a dream worth building." His words cut through the despair like lightning. The next morning, thousands of citizens showed up voluntarily to rebuild. Women carried water, men lifted bricks, children sang as they worked. What burned that night wasn't just wood and steel. It was the last bit of doubt. From the ashes, faith began to rise. Months later, the land that once echoed with despair now thundered with hope. The massive gates of the project opened when the world stood speechless. Where there was once barren soil, now stood a breathtaking complex of bamboo structures, solar grids, and sleek wooden vehicles crafted by local hands. It wasn't just a sight, it was a symbol. The media that once mocked now scrambled to cover it. "Africa's Wooden Miracle," one headline read. Reporters from across the world flew in, expecting to see a fragile dream. Instead, they found a masterpiece powered by vision, sweat, and unity. Crowds filled the streets, cheering Ibrahim's name. The same people who once doubted him now carried his posters high above their heads. Even foreign diplomats began to show interest, trying to claim they had always supported the Green Revolution. Ibrahim, however, stood silent, his gaze fixed on the horizon. As night fell, golden lights illuminated the project, a fusion of tradition and technology. Ibrahim took the stage before a roaring crowd and said, "This is not mine. This belongs to every African child who was told they couldn't dream big." His voice broke slightly, but his eyes burned with purpose, and then, before the applause faded, soldiers marched forward with a handcuffed man, the hidden enemy. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ibrahim looked at him and said, "You tried to burn the future, but fire only made it shine brighter." That night, the people didn't just celebrate a building. They celebrated the beginning of a new era, one where Africa no longer waited for miracles. It became one. The celebration was in full swing when the atmosphere suddenly shifted. A soldier whispered something into Ibrahim's ear, and his smile faded. The music stopped. Cameras turned as the crowd sensed something was about to happen. From the back of the stage, guards dragged forward a man, dusty, trembling, and defiant. It was Malik, Ibrahim's once trusted engineer, the man who had stood beside him since day one. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ibrahim stepped closer, his eyes cold and unreadable. "Tell them," he said quietly. Malik stayed silent. Then Ibrahim raised his hand, revealing a stack of intercepted documents, blueprints, schedules, and financial logs, all sold to foreign agents for bribes. The crowd erupted in disbelief. Malik finally broke down. "They promised me wealth. They said you'd destroy the country," he cried. Ibrahim stared at him for a long moment, then spoke with calm authority. "You didn't betray me, Malik. You betrayed hope." His words hit harder than any punishment could. Guards took Malik away as the crowd chanted, "Justice for the nation." That night the news spread like wildfire. The traitor had been unmasked, the leader stood tall, and Africa had chosen faith over fear. A storm of betrayal had finally cleared the sky for a new dawn. Years passed, but the story of that night never faded. The project, once mocked as an impossible dream, became the heartbeat of a transformed nation. Children studied under solar lights powered by the same system Ibrahim had once sketched on paper. Farmers used the tools developed in his workshops, and the phrase "build it yourself" became a national motto. Even after his passing, Ibrahim's presence lingered in every corner of the land. Statues rose not to glorify a man, but to remind the people what belief could build. Tourists came from across the world to see where the visionary builder once stood, but locals would smile and say, "He never left, he's in the walls, in the air, in the will of our people." In the end, Ibrahim Traoré didn't just construct a project. He built a legacy, one that whispered across generations. Dreams aren't meant to be waited for. They're meant to be built, and that was the story of Ibrahim Traoré, the visionary builder. A man who turned doubt into determination and ashes into a new beginning. His story reminds us that true leadership isn't about power. It's about purpose. It's about standing tall when the world laughs and building when everyone else gives up. The moral of this story? Even the smallest dream can shake the world if it's fueled by faith, courage, and action. You don't need perfect conditions, you just need the will to start. So what do you think about Ibrahim's journey? Do you believe one person can still change the fate of an entire nation? Let us know in the comments. Your thoughts inspire our next stories. And if you enjoyed this video, don't stop here. Check out our other powerful stories about Ibrahim Traoré's life, struggles, and the untold truths behind his rise. Click on the next video and keep your mind inspired.